Welcome to the Always Better Than Yesterday podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Hartley. This podcast exists to equip and inspire your heart-centered leadership. Every week, we bring interviews with some of the greatest heart sets and mindsets on the planet. I hope the heartprint of our time spent together is that it creates new possibilities for you and all those you come into contact with. If you'd like to explore what we could make possible for you, then head to abty.co.uk/connect and book in a free 30-minute call to begin our journey together. I just want to express a huge amount of gratitude to our sponsors, Exhale Coffee. I have been a big fan of Exhale Coffee since meeting Alex and the team back in 2022. Exhale is the first coffee to be sourced, roasted and lab tested specifically to maximize its antioxidant and anti-inflammatory potency. An independent lab test has shown that 1 cup of Exhale Coffee has the same antioxidant power as 1.8 kilos of blueberries or 55 oranges. I'm a huge fan, and Mrs. H loves the decaf, especially because she knows that Exhale use the mountain water decaffeination process, which uses only pure glacial water from the highest mountain in Mexico and no nasty chemicals. Simply head to exhalecoffee.com/ABTY for your special offer. And lastly, before I introduce this week's guest, please do subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. It would really help us leave a greater heartprint on this world. On episode 262, what an honour it is to welcome David Sutcliffe to the podcast. David is a somatic therapist and a certified core energetics practitioner. He's also a trained hypnotherapist, a mindset expert, and has extensive experience with meditation, yoga, shamanism, physical fitness, nutrition, and wellness. You may know David from his role within the popular TV series Gilmore Girls, or that viral interview with Andrew Tate. Whichever path has brought you to this moment and this podcast episode, you are in for a treat. We have an incredible conversation all about culture. We talk about masculinity. We talk about that interview with Andrew Tate and whether he is a good role model for our children. And we talk about his great work that he's doing with the School for Kings. Be sure to check out all of David's links within the show notes, listen to his podcast, and here we go. It's episode 262 with David Sutcliffe.
Happy to be here.
I last week just got home from the States. We were over in the States with my family, and I don't know. I was just saying to you a minute ago, like I'm at a point where I want simpler times. I just want to get a ranch. I just want to wear a cowboy hat all the time. I just want to get a truck. I just want to listen to country music all the time. Like that's just where I'm at right now.
Where were you in the US?
Well, we went to Orlando, so I it wasn't the entire US experience. I
Right.
admit that, but yeah, so we went over with the in-laws and did the kind of Disney experience with the kids, and there's some significance there. But I just love being on the road and just in my cowboy hat listening to country music.
I relate. I'm in Texas and I'd love to get a ranch and just work the land, have some animals, simple
Yeah.
life.
Simpler life, simpler life. You're doing some really meaningful work. I'm really excited for this conversation, particularly around the men's space and the work that you're doing there. Have you always felt like you've done meaningful work? That you've spent your time in Hollywood. Have you Googled yourself recently?
Have I what?
Have you
Googled
Googled
myself?
yourself recently?
I have.
Well, the thing I found, it says David Sutcliffe gave up acting, joined a cult, and he became a life coach.
Oh, really? Wow. There's all kinds of things about me online. I don't think I joined a cult. I understand why people would see it that way.
Yeah.
I did quit acting. I was in Hollywood for, I don't know, 20 years, had a great career, really enjoyed it, had amazing experiences, met a lot of interesting, talented people, and I feel really grateful for all of that. But I became interested in the work I'm doing now, really at an early age, but I didn't go deep into it until my mid 30s. But once I discovered the particular style of
Mm,
psychotherapy that I now
mm,
practice, um, it just took over my life. I became obsessed with it. It was fascinating to me, and it was just a slow evolution. I'm just following what I'm interested in, what I'm passionate about, and ultimately that led me to leave Hollywood and do what I'm doing now.
Mm. Yeah, it's really powerful, and and so much of this work invites us to confront the past, the experiences we've had, and before I ask you about some of your earlier experiences, I think one of the greatest tests of a man's character is when he's given all the fame, the love, the adoration. I was fortunate enough to interview a wonderful man called Dr. Gary Chapman, and Dr. Gary is famous for writing the five love languages. And on the very last page of his book, I remember this very, very clearly. It kind of haunted me. It said, "For all the love we do not receive as children, we become adults that seek that in the world." And hand on heart, I became that guy that absolutely saw all the love I didn't receive. We have a very similar story in terms of fatherlessness in the home from a very young age, and I'd love to know how that kind of played out for you, because I absolutely became someone who saw all that love and adoration in the world, and I had to. The reason I'm really interested in this journey, this masculinity work and this journey, is because I had to go and learn it for myself. I didn't have a model of what that looked like. I didn't know how to follow it. And I've been with my wife since I was 15. So she's had me kind of man and boy, and much of our suffering in our marriage is, I reflect back on that now, is because I almost came into this relationship side of things with my hands behind my back. I didn't realize some of these shadows that I had when I was creating. So I appreciate I've just said quite a bit there, but how do you kind of reflect on, those early days by getting that fame, by getting that power? Like, what was that like as a sword to wield? Like, how do you reflect on your time?
Well, I think you only, or I speak for myself, I only realized that I was being motivated by a desire to be seen and loved once I got the success that I was
Mm,
longing for. Listen, I had a passion for acting. I was good at it. It's creative,
mm,
and I have that aspect of me. So there was something in the impulse toward it that was genuine. However, there was another shadow side that was trying to prove something, trying
mm,
to get recognition, trying to win the love of my mother and my father, the love that I didn't get or
mm,
receive when I was a child. And so, of course, once you get that level of success and fame, and are left feeling empty, you start to ask yourself some hard questions. What is it that I really want? And
mm,
what's going on here? And that
mm,
was really the journey for me. And I think that's a journey for a lot of people. And I'm grateful that I got the success that I had. But it's led me here. And that part of me, I don't know if it ever really goes away. I mean, there's something in all of us that's wanting recognition. But I guess I trying as I get older to purify that
yeah.
as much as I can to make sure that I'm giving without expectation of getting anything back. It's just the purity of the expression and just following what it is that I feel
Mm,
passionate about. But I think this is a common journey for a lot of people, particularly those who were raised in a broken home, particularly those who were raised without a father. And so a lot of what I'm doing now is just sharing what I've learned and trying to help younger men see themselves in a more clear way so that they can get off the grind and
yeah.
get out of frustration and the suffering that they may be experiencing and trust
Mm.
their true self and the goodness of that.
Yeah. But the paradox and the irony is that if that is the source of our motivation, then we can't ever outwork that. It's just never be enough, will it? And I think I caused myself enough suffering by that mentality. Work harder, do more. I was never gonna, this word surrender, right? Surrender was never in my vocabulary until I had a kind of a Jesus encounter in a church. I mean, that's a whole different story. But something happened in my heart that my mind didn't make sense of, which gave me the okay, there's something to this. I'll surrender, I'll start listening, and I've tried to be a good disciple since. But I guess for me, it's like being able to, and the word I think is really important on one of your websites is this integrated man, this
Mm.
integration between the heart and the mind, this integration between the light and the dark, the gift and the shadow. And it takes courage to go and look. And I think if anyone's seeking, then they shall find. And I'd love to know what some of the things that you found in your seeking. I've seen that you've done vision quests. I think these experiences are fascinating. I'd love to hear more about the ventures that you've been on in your journey.
Well, yeah. What does it mean to be an integrated man? I think it requires going through some kind of initiation
Mm. Mhm.
on a quest. And I think it requires owning all of the aspects of yourself and
Yeah.
being in acceptance of them. And we are both light and dark.
Mm.
We all have a shadow.
Mhm.
And I think an integrated man is aware of his shadow, has come to
Mm.
terms with it, is humble to it, uh, but allows himself to be identified with the light, which is not an easy thing to do because we can become very attached to an identity and ego, as I was when I was an actor. And so being able to surrender, as you said, to our heart or a higher version of ourselves and let ourselves be guided as opposed to being driven by our will, what, what we want, what we're trying to make happen in the world, um, I think is a recipe for suffering. So the integrated man has to go through all the trials and tribulations, has to feel their pain, has to come to terms with their anger, their resentment,
Mm.
the ways that they can be selfish, and just really take ownership all that, and to know that there's something really powerful waiting for them on the other side.
I have an 11-year-old son, and I think there's some research out there that says whether you had a good or bad father, like that means nothing, because either way, you can use that to fuel it for your own parenting. Whether you have a good father, you continue their legacy. If you have not such a great one, well, then you know what to do differently. You don't necessarily get a roadmap for how to do these things. And for me, with my son, I love the fact that I get to have this relationship with him, but I'm also starting to get to that point where he's coming into teenage years, and I'm thinking about exactly what you've just said. There aren't really many rites of passage in our modern culture. We don't really have this, and I think in my observation, whether it be in church or in general society, men are quite passive in the home. I think they're outsourcing a lot of their leadership to their partners, their wives, and I think the young people will suffer for that. And I'd love to kind of bring some of that back into my own family, where I'm trying to lead, I'm trying to develop these young people, and a rite of passage. I'd love to know what your thoughts are on kind of rites of passage, particularly for young men and young, I guess, adolescents.
Well, I think what you're saying is right. I think a lot of men have abandoned their authority in the home, and I think
Mm.
that's to the detriment of their children.
Mm.
I've been doing this work, this somatic work. Core energetics is what I'm trained in for a
Mm-hmm.
long time.
Mm-hmm.
Been in a lot of groups, seen a lot of things, and a theme that is always present is the longing for the father.
Mm.
And it really struck me when I started to see that pattern emerge in others and in myself that there's this deep need to really feel the presence of the father. And when children
Mm.
don't feel that, uh, they don't tend to feel safe in the world, and they're unsure of
Mm.
themselves, and it can go in one of two ways. They can become passive,
Mm-hmm.
or they can become overly dominant, and neither is really integrated. And so I think a big part of why I'm doing this work, and in particular why I'm doing it with men, is for that reason, so that men can understand themselves in a deeper way and really understand their value.
Mm.
Because I mean, it's been a barrage of insults towards men, and almost as long as I can remember, men have been diminished and demeaned and derided. And of course, when you're consistently told that you're bad or an aspect of you is bad, your masculinity
Yeah.
is toxic, you're going to contract. You're going to make a decision to not maybe show up in all of your fullness,
Mm.
and that's a real problem. I mean, I think I would argue that that's the predominant problem in the West, and that's why we are where we are. And I also understand that it's a reaction to a overbearing father from the past that was maybe tyrannical,
Mhm.
but it feels like the pendulum has swung too far in one direction, and I think that's why you're seeing
Mm.
an explosion in men's work and interest in people like Jordan Peterson or Andrew Tate and many others that are promoting this message of strength and discipline
Yeah.
and dedication.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really, really good thing. And so, um, men do need rites of passage. We need to feel challenged. We
Mm.
need to be put to the test. We need um, children, young boys need to be initiated into the world of men and understand that there's a responsibility that they have, and that they're there to serve,
Mm.
and that there's something bigger than themselves that should be motivating them.
Yeah.
And and so we've lost those traditions, and so for me, I certainly didn't get that, and
Mm.
that's one of the reasons that I sought it out later in life through things like the Vision Quest.
Yeah. This podcast is all about heart-centered leadership. And, I've been running the podcast nearly 6 years, over 260 interviews, and I've had to evolve in this understanding that heart-centered leadership, it should have been obvious to me, right? But it wasn't. That heart-centered leadership looks and is expressed very differently between men and women. And even the idea of saying that is almost gives me a little bit of, oh, I'm going to be judged for that sentence. Oh, and isn't that just how the world is at the moment? Like how to coerce and control a mass set of people, through thoughts, through, I think there's this, is it old Browning said, for evil to prevail, it just requires good men to say nothing and do nothing.
Right.
And I'm trying to choose my words very
Well,
carefully
you
here.
better I mean you want to lead with the heart, but you better be adept with the sword.
Right.
It, because evil is real, and
Yes.
you have to be willing to step up and fight it and
Yeah.
and find that part of yourself. Otherwise, the evil forces will take over. And evil manifests, it animates through weakness.
Yes.
That's how it gets in.
Yeah.
And so it's the responsibility of every man, I believe, to make themselves as strong as possible. Now, that looks
Mm-hmm.
different for every
Mm.
man. There's not one version of strength, but everybody knows inside themselves what they need to be doing to
Mm.
make
Mm.
themselves strong. And they all should be doing that and should be encouraged to do that.
Yeah.
And look no further than women. What women want: strong men. They want powerful men. They want men in their authority, because the feminine naturally wants to surrender to male leadership.
Right. But
That's built in, but they're not going to surrender to a man who's weak.
no. And the activism, particularly the great thing about social media is that everyone's got a voice. The bad thing about social media is that everyone's got a voice. The activism is loud, it's distorting. And I don't think it's representative of the majority of how these natural dynamics are at play. I've had to have certain conversations with a school because of the ideologies that are being taught to young, pure minds. And it's interesting how the conversation, rather than the truth of the topic, it gets directed to, well, aren't you supposed to be heart centered? Are you talk about leading with love and being heart centered, and yet it's the misconception is that that doesn't mean we have hard and difficult conversations where truth and the pursuit of truth is put in the middle of that conversation, not just what
Mhm.
makes people comfortable.
The truth can be painful.
Mm.
And I don't think that we should be indulging in supporting people's illusions. So, I mean, that's what we see going on right now, and
Mm.
it's being manipulated as, being good and tolerant and loving,
Yeah.
but that's not the case at all.
Yeah.
Love can be and should be at times fierce and
Yes.
firm. My relationship with my wife, if all I'm ever doing is trying to be kind and
Mm.
compassionate and loving toward her, we're not going to resolve much.
Mm.
Sometimes it requires firmness
Mm.
and difficult conversations and the confrontation of things.
Yeah.
Sometimes she needs to be called out.
Yeah.
Sometimes I need to be called out.
Yes.
And there has to be space for all of that.
Yeah.
And that is a kind of love. And I think
Yes.
this idea of love, which is tolerate everything, is not actually love. Again, it's weakness, and it's a fear of self confrontation, and that fear of self confrontation
Yeah.
will inevitably lead to an attachment to these illusions. And if we are in illusion, we're in a lie. And if we're in a lie, eventually those lies will compound on themselves and lead us into
Yeah.
hell.
I think the word's called pride. The attachment to the worldly things is pride, and pride comes before a fall, I guess. And it's nice to hear you say that your wife. I know that you got married recently. How's the honeymoon period?
It's great.
Yeah.
I mean, I got married very late in life. I was very impacted by the wedding, much more than I
Mm.
thought I would be. It was a deeply spiritual ceremony, and it
Mm.
affected me. It changed me, and I'm really happy to finally be married. I got a great lady, and yeah, we're really enjoying each other right now.
Yeah, it's you know, I say inverted commas, most men want a queen, right? But sometimes you don't attract what you want, you attract what you are. And I guess I wonder whether you can reflect now on your relationship at this point of your life, having done all this deep work, like the mirror and the attraction, like how is this different?
Well, I have a lot more awareness and consciousness, a lot less shame, a lot less
Mm.
judgment. I think a lot of my previous relationships were unconscious attempts to resolve and work through some of the issues that I had with my mother, and
Hmm.
issues that I had with myself, and fears that I had about love. I mean, there's a great book called Getting the Love We Want, which I think is a classic for relationships. And it's just this idea that usually in our partner, we are seeking through them the thing that we wanted but didn't get from our
Mhm.
caregivers. And that's something that you can never actually do because that time has come and gone. And so that's the
Mm.
source of a lot of frustration in relationship. And I was finally able to get over that and really meet her in the place of who she actually is, and love her there, and take back all my projections and unconscious demands and resentments, and just love her, not as an object, or some replacement, or some need that I had for affirmation.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Love that. And I think my greatest life lesson, based on the back of that kind of Chapman quote, was that we're not here to come for love; we're to come from love. And
Mm.
I think that's such a powerful dynamic. Is that when we learn how to resolve some of these things, we learn how to give ourselves what we need, so that in our masculine state we can come and be the presence of love. We can embody and come from love, like needing nothing, because we've already got that or given ourselves that. But I think guilt and shame, particularly in men. So a couple of weeks ago, we put out an episode with Robert Glover, who wrote No More Mr. Nice Guy. And one of the things that he talks about is that in that shame and that guilt, we learn a subconscious message that means that we are not okay as we are. And we change ourselves and we become this nice guy. And I know that you put out a video recently about, yeah, it's not about the nice guy. The nice guy is not such a nice guy. Like, just revel in that paradox for us. Why is that nice guy not a nice guy?
Well, we, as I said earlier, we are light and dark, and if and listen, nice is what like nobody likes nice. There's a genuine is actually good.
Yeah.
Nice isn't necessarily good. Nice implies to me it implies weakness and self betrayal.
Yeah.
Be kind to people. But if we're projecting an image of goodness and niceness, very often what I see is that we're hiding some shadow aspect of us, and that shadow aspect is eventually going to reveal itself, and which is why a lot of women complain that these nice guys end up turning out to be assholes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because some aspect of them is repressed. Like I make no illusions. I'm not. I can be nice, but I'm not always nice, and I don't think being nice is always useful. So it's a mask in some sense, and a lot of men. And I understand. I used to be that. I used to buy into that notion, and I would get a lot of praise and love for being a nice guy. But what would happen is I didn't really get what I wanted because, of course, I wasn't being authentic. I was doing it in
Yeah.
reaction to what I perceived somebody wanted from me. I was living up to some expectation that I was projecting onto them, which is a kind of manipulation. It's a kind of narcissism, really, and it's controlling.
I'm trying to control how you see me.
Exactly. Exactly. And so one of the things that I'm trying to do with men is, just be authentic, be real, be that, as I said, like women, your children, the world, they want to be able to feel you. And we need to learn to contain ourselves, and contain our energy, and contain our emotions. But if I'm angry, I'm going to be with that anger. I'm not going to discharge it and name call, but sometimes I'm angry, and it's not healthy for me to hold that back.
Yeah.
It's good for me to express it. And I want the same from my wife. If she's angry, like let it out, express it. Like, let's be in that together. And I understand that you're not always going to be nice to me, and that's okay.
It's important. It's important, isn't it? And I remember years ago watching this table conversation between Will and Jada Smith, and just like I look back at it now, I'm just saying, ugh, like, because talking about happiness and my happiness on the honestly, if happiness was the goal of my marriage, I wouldn't be married for very long, because we ain't always happy. My wife ain't always happy. I'm not always happy. But are we committed? Are we loving? Are we invested? Are we in it for the long term? Absolutely. And John DeMartini on the show, he said the purpose of love is authenticity, not happiness. And I was like, there you go. It's about having that space where you can bring all of yourself, where you're not hiding, resenting, or keeping part. And that means that if we're going to have conflicts, we're going to be united, connected. We're going to go through it. And I saw something recently on one of your pages is like, conflict is intimacy.
Right. Well, I mean, me and my lady got in a brawl recently where, we've both lost our minds in different, and that's true for all couples. Well, that's an intimate thing to let the other person see you out of control, deep in your trigger, deep in your resentment, like in your pain, in your rage. That is a kind of intimacy. And I want to be in a relationship where it's safe enough to be able to go there. Obviously, I don't want that to be a repetitive pattern. I mean, hopefully, people use conflict to get to deeper intimacy, like that you understand that the conflict is not really about what it's about. There's something underneath it, and are we able as a couple to get to the truth of it? But I think relationship really is it's the deepest spiritual practice that we can have. Most people are not going to become monks or priests and dedicate their whole lives to spiritual practice, and so most of us do it through the relationship.
Hmm.
And if you can see it that way, that it's not about your happiness, it's about like a deep
Yeah.
sense of fulfillment.
Yeah.
And to get to fulfillment,
Yes.
to get to depth, to get to integrity, authenticity, that's going to require that you face and feel your pain and the discomfort and your fear. And so all of that is inevitable in relationship. And one of the things that I'm trying to do with people, and I work with a lot of couples, is to teach them, to show them that that's part of it. It's okay. Like don't judge yourself or your relationship if you have conflict. There's healthy ways to have conflict, and it's an inevitable part of growth.
Well, I think it's really powerful. And, a couple of weeks ago, I was fortunate enough to have a conversation with John Eldridge. John Eldridge is prominent in the Christian men's space, and he wrote a number of books. One included kind of Wild at Heart, and in Wild at Heart, he outlines like a masculine journey, like almost like archetypes. I know that you follow like the hero's journey, and in these archetypes, he talks about how we go through these phases of initially being the beloved son, needing to know that the father's there, dependable, loves him. And in that context, we get to then become an adventurer. We go out and get to become a bit of a cowboy, and we become a lover and a cowboy. We become this young man that's exploring the world, finding a bit of power, finding a bit of love and romance. And then he gets that power, and he finds this responsibility of becoming a king, the king archetype, and then gets to the point of becoming a sage, comes to the end where all the people go to wisdom and grow. And I know that you have a real affinity with the king. You mentioned his name earlier. I'm not going to say it right now, but you came face to face with a man in Romania last year. What was your assessment, psycho assessment of this man? Is he a king?
That's a great question. I mean, I didn't ask him this question directly, but I implied it that he's definitely a conqueror,
Mm,
but is he a king?
mm,
And is there and there's a difference. And can you conquer and can you rule? And I think it's two different skills, and certainly there is some crossover. My take on Andrew is I think he's fundamentally a good man who's trying to do good in the world. I like a lot of the things that he says. He's incredibly intelligent,
mm,
and he's a brilliant orator and writer. I mean, his Twitter it's astonishing, some of the things that he comes up with. And
mm.
so that can get overlooked because of his provocative nature, and so he's a bit of a heyoka as well. He likes to play with things, but I really think at his core he's a good man, and that's the impression that I got from him. I really felt his heart and his
Mm.
playfulness, and we all have our faults, and we're
Yeah,
all striving to be better. And I don't think that he's any different. He's not a
yeah.
perfect man. I don't think he would claim to be. But the one thing that I think everybody can admire about him is that he's fully expressed,
Mm.
and I think that's admirable. I think it's
Yeah.
inspiring.
Which I don't think he understood what you meant by saying that is vulnerable. Like in its
That's right.
nature, that is vulnerability,
Well, you're letting the whole world see who you are.
right? You're
The
opening
good, the
yourself up
bad,
to
the light, and the
judgment.
dark. That's right. And that takes incredible vulnerability. And so when people
Mm.
say Andrew's not vulnerable, I'm like, are you willing to put yourself out there like
100%.
that? Are you willing
Yeah.
to say whatever you think
Yes.
without the filter, without worrying about how it's going to be
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
perceived or the attacks that you might face?
Yeah.
Probably not. And so I think that's
Yes.
primarily why people admire him, not so much for the things that he says, although he does say a lot of really interesting things. I think it's his willingness to say them. You cannot deny that that is
Mm.
a man who has tremendous fucking courage.
Right. Did you get to hear him sing?
I did. He did not. He did not sing, but I took it as a victory because he felt very self-conscious about his singing,
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
then he later sang in some video where they were recreating the prison scene, and he was singing a song. And of course, it turns out he's got quite a lovely voice.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's interesting, isn't it? Because he says his override emotion is pride, and obviously what we were talking about earlier, and the fall, and it's I just I get I got a sense from him, and I know that you were kind of probing on this, like, dude, relax, surrender, like, because it just feels like yes, he's on the attack all the time, but it's the attack is the form of defense. It's the fear of losing it all, and that's not living in a state of what I have an understanding of God to be, which is abundance. He seems to
Hmm.
be living in a hardened state of. Well, even his he says that if he believes that God's trying to test everybody, and he's going to be the last one to break, like.
Right.
And if that's his worldview, then that's the reality, I guess, he's creating. Who are we to say that's right or wrong? But yeah, it's really interesting.
Yeah. I mean, the fact that he subjected himself to that conversation, that he actually asked for the conversation and then
Yeah.
indicated that he wants to do it again, showed me that he knows that there's things about himself that he
Mm,
doesn't quite understand, and that he enjoys the sparring nature of the interview,
yeah.
and that there's a curiosity toward it. I think all of us have a hard time giving up our defense. We become very attached to it
Yeah.
because it's what we know and it's what kept us safe.
Yeah.
And it's particularly hard when our defense is making us extremely wealthy and famous
Mm,
and getting us all kinds of accolades. Had I become a major movie star and not a successful but essentially journeyman actor, it might have been a lot harder for me to give up Hollywood
mm,
because I would have, you know, been trapped in this bubble of success and adoration. And I've seen that with
yeah.
many other people. And in fact, I went back to a party a few years after I'd given up acting, and it was a big fancy party and lots of celebrities there. And I was catching up with some old friends, some of who were very successful actors, and they were asking me like, "Where you been? What's going on?" And I told them about my career transition, and I thought that they would have some judgment or
Yeah.
thought that
Yeah.
I couldn't cut it or couldn't make it. That was my
Yeah.
projection, my fear. But every single one of them said to me, "Oh man, good for you. You got
Yeah.
out."
Yeah. Oh, because they can sense the freedom.
Right. And once you're that level of fame, there's no way out. You
Right.
can't just
Right.
become
Right.
a
Right.
regular person. I didn't become famous enough that that was really a problem. It's, it gets in the way sometimes, but for people who are that famous, you are now trapped in something, and there's a tremendous burden that comes with that and a loss of freedom.
Did you enjoy the conversation?
I did.
Mm,
He was, you mean with Andrew?
yeah.
I loved it. I mean, it was a lot of fun. I mean, he's game, and he's a smart guy, and he's interesting man. And obviously, you're sitting across from somebody who is one of the most famous people on the planet. And he was also, I thought, kind and warm and generous, and was willing to play along with my frame. I mean, he certainly tried to
Mm,
control the frame for most of the conversation, but in the end, I pulled him into my frame, and he surrendered. He surrendered
mm,
to it. He
mm.
he he let go um and gave over to my direction, if only
Yeah.
for a moment or two. And I thought that was really beautiful, to be
Mm,
honest.
mm,
And
mm.
I was grateful for it. And I thought that, you know, not that that was exactly a therapy session, but it's probably as
Yeah.
close to a therapy session that you're going to see on camera.
Yeah.
If that was my first session with a client, I would have
Yeah.
considered it a success.
Yeah. Yeah. Courage is a willingness to meet you there is powerful. As I said about this school, there was a month-long pride campaign where my children were subjected to significant figures within the pride community because of their pride characteristics, and they were also shown some characters who should be avoided, not good influence. And Andrew Tate was one of those people shown to my children as someone to avoid, not good, not a positive influence on young people. Um, as a parent, you know, I have an 11-year-old. Let's just say Andrew's content is, say, 16 for 16-year-olds. Is he a force for good? Is he a positive influence? Is he someone that I should be allowing my child to take opinions and views from?
I think so. I mean, you probably want to give it some context. I
Mhm.
know. I was just having a conversation with a father whose son was, I think, around 16, 17, who was really into Andrew Tate, and the kid had a lot of awareness. He was like, "Yeah,
Mm,
I know. I see what he's doing, what Andrew's doing. I see that he's playing a game. I don't take in everything that he says, but there's a lot of what he says that is really compelling and
yeah,
interesting." And I
yeah,
think the call to be the best version of yourself. I mean, how can you argue with that? Like, be strong, be dedicated,
mm,
you know, provide, protect.
yeah,
Those are virtues that all
yeah,
men should have. And obviously, the fact that so many young men are resonating with his message that says something,
mhm,
that there's something in what he's saying that they want to hear. There's a need for that kind
mm,
of firmness. I don't think every man needs to be Andrew Tate and channel that, but every man is not Andrew Tate.
yeah,
But you know, if Andrew Tate was your coach,
yeah.
I think you'd
You're
like
going to
that.
improve. You're going to
Yeah, you're going
improve.
to improve. He's going to challenge you, and
Yeah,
he's also. I felt it like he's underneath all the bluster and the tough guy, as I said, and I think this is why he's so popular.
yeah,
Is because I think he's got a lot of love in his heart,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
and I think it shines through despite
yeah.
the defense. And
Well,
I
despite his suffering, the first thing he's thinking about in prison is to provide for his loved ones.
That's right.
No greater gift as man to lay down the life, that lay down his life for those that he loves, is what it says in the book. So I can see that. I can see that. And again, the same way that a sports person might have a coach for your athletics, your durability, your strength. You know, for me personally, I'm never going to outsource the education of my children. You know, beyond me, I'm going to take a leading role within that. That's always the context. And then giving our children the ability to discern. I think Gordon Neufeld, who's a parenting expert, came on the show before. He says if our children don't know who they are, they will find that out in the world. And which
Right.
is why many young people, particularly on TikTok, are confused. They're they're confused about who they are, their identity. What does it mean to be a man, a boy? What there's such a wave of mass confusion that I imagine someone with Andrew's, conviction, it's like, oh my God, there's some clarity. I'm hearing some truth for the first time in a very long time, and it's going to have a gravitational pull.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. As I said earlier, there must be something in what he's saying that is true if men are being drawn to him. And I think there
Mm,
is there is a conviction and there's a challenge. Men like to be challenged. I know
mm,
when I was growing up, I loved the coaches who were tough, who were firm, who had
mm,
conviction, who were challenging. I responded to that. It evoked something inside me that I really that I liked and that inspired me to be better. And it wasn't always comfortable,
mm,
but I appreciated it. So I mean, he's representing something I think in the culture right now,
mm,
and he's certainly an extreme pole of masculinity. But as I said earlier, the poles swung the pole swung so far the other way.
mm.
I think it takes a guy like him to kind of try to pull it back into the center. And so, yes, he can be extreme at times, but I also notice that he's got a lot of self-awareness, and he's tempered his message. He's refined it. He's seemed to understand his responsibility and his place in the world, and he's taking that on. And I've noticed a change in him, that he is in fact stepping more into this role as a king. And I'll say one other thing about him that I think is important is he's got a real he feels a real responsibility to his ancestors.
Yeah.
And I think that's correct. You know, that I have to live up to my name. I have to live up to my father and his father's father and all the men who came before me. Like, I have a responsibility there. And that resonates strongly with me in the work that I do with Native Americans, because praying to the ancestors is very, very common, and respecting your elders. And I mean, their god is literally named, you know, Tonkashila grandfather. You know, so it really is the elder, the ancestor is who you're praying to.
Give me the wisdom to make it through this life. Yeah.
Exactly.
And you know, I've had many kind of grandfather figures on this podcast, including a man called Neil Donald Walsh. And Neil's famous for writing a book called Conversations with God. Talks about how he had this moment where he's channeling the message he's receiving through God. Very famous series of books. And in it, he says, God says to him that the purpose of your life is to create and experience who you say you are. So I've had this kind of rattling around my mind for the last 6 to 7 months. And I love the section in your conversation with Andrew, which he's talking about the top G, the identity, you know, and then he's like, how he's used that top G identity. He said, right, you call yourself top G. How is he going to show up? How is he going to handle that? And I thought that was a perfect demonstration of that. What Neil says is that the purpose of this life is to both create who we are and experience who we say we are. Well, fortunate for Andrew, he got a wonderful experience to help him show to himself and the world who Top G is. What an irony.
Yeah. Yeah, no, exactly. He created an idealized version of himself that he now has to live up to. And he has to do all of those things to live up to it. So he, you know, if you want to call yourself the top G, you got to wake up every day and prove it primarily to yourself. And I like that. I like that idea. And certainly there's bravado and bluster in it. But if Andrew didn't have, and people couldn't feel his sense of humor, I don't think that he would have nearly the impact that he has. We feel the game that he's playing with himself, and we feel the fun that he's having with it. I think that's also the appeal with someone like Trump, and the people who despise Trump, they can't see it. Like, Trump is, for me, the funniest politician that we've ever encountered. Like, he has an incredible sense of humor, and you feel where he understands on some level that all of this is just a game, and that he's playing and having fun with. And I think that approach to life is very, very powerful. I heard a David Cho, the Korean artist, who's I love, who's brilliant, a madman, but he's brilliant, say, you have to take life totally seriously, and you have to treat everything like it's a joke at the same time. And you have to hold that polarity, right? Because you can only win the game by taking it seriously, right? But unless you hold it lightly and understand that this is all just Maya, none of it's really real, and we're just characters in a play. You know, you're going to get lost in your pain and your resentment, and you'll get lost in the Maya. So holding that tension, I think, is a very hard thing to do. But I see that with Andrew, that he's actually got a very deep, I think, understanding of the fundamental nature of reality.
Yeah. because I think as it Buddha talked about how if we get out drawn out of that center, if we get towards the edges, that's where the suffering occurs. And I'm all for, as masculine presence, self-induced suffering, so that we can bear greater stress. I put myself in many ice baths, and I've fasted for 5 days. The power of God through me, sort of thing. I understand that concept of suffering. Talk to me about vision quests. Like, talk to me about the transformation that some of these practices that you've done. What is it? Because I'm inviting men on a journey. I think men are more listening to the show than ever. So I've got some of their ears, and
Yeah.
the next phase is, what do I do next? How do I become this integrated man that David's so talking about? How do I become a king?
I was thinking about this just the other day. All the chiefs. So I'm also a sun dancer, and the
Mhm.
sun dance and the vision quest go hand in hand. They're part of the initiation rites in the Lakota tradition, um, and I'll get to the vision quest, but the sun dance is almost even more interesting and powerful. It's 4 days dancing, in an arbor, under the hot sun and
Hmm.
without food and water. And during those 4 days, at some point, every dancer gets pierced, which means they're cut in the chest and both sides, and a buffalo bone peg is put through, and then you are affixed to the tree with a rope, and that you dance
Yeah,
attached to the tree, and then you
yeah,
pull off and make your flesh offering. And it sounds incredibly extreme and
yeah,
painful, and it is.
yeah, yeah,
It's not as bad as you think it's going to be, but all of the chiefs
yeah,
all have piercings all up and down their chest
yeah.
and shoulders and back. And it's a beautiful thing that the kings of their community, they're in their suffering with you, and you can literally see their suffering and the sacrifices that they've made as scars on their
Mm.
body, and it really makes you humble to them and appreciative of their leadership. So that's the value system of that community, that nation, as they
I
say.
imagine you're there, nature, grounded, feet on the floor. I bet there's an incredible sense of power that's going through your body in that time, in that moment.
It's incredible. I mean, it's a lot
Mm,
of suffering. It's a lot of struggle,
mm.
and the only way out of it is to surrender and to
Yes,
to pray. And so the purpose of it is to bring you closer to God, which is
yes,
closer to the truth.
yes,
And the only way to get there is through these acts of sacrifice and suffering, to break you down,
yes.
essentially. And it's an incredibly powerful technology.
Yeah.
And the Vision Quest is the same. It's 4 days, 4 nights alone, in a confined space
Mm,
somewhere in nature. Um, yeah, no food, no water, and you're just with yourself, which for some is harder actually than the Sundance, because you're
mm,
alone and alone with your thoughts, and there's nowhere to go. There's nothing to distract you, and you're waiting for your vision, and it comes, and it's not what you'd expect it to be, but you again, you touch into a deep sense of truth within yourself, and about the fundamental nature of this world that we're living in. And I think what I've learned is the only way to get there to that deep sense of truth is through these kind of initiation rites, through the challenge, through the suffering, intentional suffering. And also, I would say, within a lineage, there's something, anyone can go out with a group of people and do a kind of vision quest, but it's different when you're doing it
mm.
within the tradition of a lineage
Yeah.
that has gone on for hundreds, perhaps thousands of years, and has built this system over time. And that
Mm,
system, those rituals have an intelligence to them that maybe is not obvious to you right away, but
mm,
the more you dive into it, the more you see that how important
mm.
they actually are. And there's a lot. to it. It's not just about going sitting out there for 4 days fasting. It's something entirely different.
Something far greater. I guess it taps into the honor and the gratitude, and I think these are some of the things that maybe the masculine heart has been conditioned out of, just appreciating that nature and beauty and tradition. I think I think we're in a generation where men's availability of their heart has been, we've been conditioned out of it, right? Vulnerability, the ability to put ourselves in these positions, been conditioned out of it. So bravely placing yourself in an environment where you're going to crack open and just be, or wow, that's what a gift that is. Like, how do people get involved in your work? How do they select you as their sage?
um, people come to me, I guess, because they feel a certain kind of resonance.
Mm.
For whatever reason, they're drawn to what it is that I'm saying, or just the feeling that I'm giving off. I mean, I'm not for everybody. There's a lot of great teachers and coaches out there, and but there's a certain kind of men that feel drawn to the work that I'm doing. It's quite intense, the work I do. It's not surface level. So when people come to work with me, they know that we're going to go in, we're going to go deep. We're going to try to get to the root of what's actually going on, and it's going to be confronting, and there's a lot of different ways to get there. And so I to be honest, I think there's more and more men that are longing for that. They're longing for something, um, strong, longing for that challenge, and they intuitively know that in order to get where they really want to go, they have to be willing to confront those aspects of themselves. Just um, dealing with the surface level, or which, and listen, I don't want to demean other things. I mean, everybody is drawn to what they're drawn to, and you have to meet people where they are. But my work is there's a certain kind of intensity to it. So there's a certain kind of person that's drawn to it, which is probably why I resonate, and Andrew resonates with me,
Mm.
right? There's a
Hmm.
there's a resonance there because I'm a pretty fucking intense guy myself.
Yeah.
And you know what I mean? I can meet him in
Yeah.
that place, and he can feel that I can meet him in that place in my own way. I'm not a
Yeah.
fighter, but I think that in his mind makes me trustable.
Yes, because he said he was going to go and just box everybody and beat everybody. And I think for people that are sparring at that very top level, they need people better than themselves. I'm not saying you're better, but they need people that are going to challenge them.
Yeah.
Because if you're, in the room, the smartest in the room, and then you're not really capable of then growing further. So I guess you kind of really great sparring partner for him.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And I'm a little bit older than him, and I've been around, I've been in Hollywood, I've met a lot of
Mm.
famous, powerful people, so I'm also not intimidated by
Yeah.
his fame in that way because I've experienced it. So, um, yeah, it's and also that it would make sense to me that he would be curious about that, just because I think if Andrew was going to take up therapy, he'd probably you know choose a form of therapy that was really intense.
Yeah. Yeah. Love that. Well, there'll be a third episode coming out soon, then, won't there? But I think many women are looking for good men. How we talked about the nice guy. The nice guy can appear nice and good but we get some hidden kind of surprises. How will a woman know a good man when she finds one? What will be the hallmarks? What will be the clues as to whether he's healed and integrated?
I think she has to feel that he puts himself first, and at least at the beginning. What does that mean? It means that he is dedicated to his mission,
Mm,
and that she can feel that he's on that mission, and
mm,
that he's doing all the things that he needs to do to serve that mission. And I think that's only when a woman is going to feel safe with a man. If a man betrays himself or his mission for the woman, that's not trustable.
Mhm.
And so there's a don't you can never give yourself away for a woman, even if they protest. You know, women are always, whether they're aware of it or not, they're always testing men.
Yeah.
Because if, and I understand why they would. Um, the feminine naturally wants to surrender, and if you want to
Yeah.
have children with the man,
Yep.
you have to surrender. You have
Yeah.
to trust him that he's going to be there and take care of things when you're in an incredibly vulnerable situation, pregnant and with a young baby. There's not
Yeah.
much else that you can do.
Mm.
And so it makes sense to me that the feminine would always be testing that man to make sure he's in his integrity and strong and he's taking care of his business. So, um, you know, don't like, I would say to women, um, look for a man who knows himself, look for a man who's got humility, look for a man who's strong and committed and also has a deep desire to serve, who has values and that you can feel those values. Um, I think I think that's I think that's what all women are essentially longing for. And you know, more I know there's all this talk of incels and weak men, but and I think that's true. But I don't know. I just see the movement happening on so many different levels where men are uh, seeking out places and community where they can find themselves and find their strength. And I mean, I just did a group last night with, you know, and it just, it's, men are fucking awesome, you know, like they're just,
Yeah.
when they're together and they're real, like they're so sweet and powerful and they're longing for connection and
Yep.
authenticity. I mean, that's all I see,
Yep.
you know, and I understand you see
Yep.
different TikTok videos where guys are, you know, mouthing off, or maybe you see Andrew Tate in one of his crazy videos. But when they're really dropped into who they really are, I think men
100%.
are deeply vulnerable and spiritual and beautiful.
They want to be honorable. They want to protect people. They want to improve themselves. When a man feels loved, he'll improve himself. And that's my experience too. And I think the challenge and the accountability I have to anybody listening to this is to not be drawn into cancelling. You know, not to be drawn to taking the views and the opinions of other people, which is why I love and fascinated by hearing this conversation, because you have to be willing to sit around a table and have these conversations with people, and I think it's very powerful. There's this idea that I'm super respectful of your time. We'll wrap up in a second, and there's this bit that where the modern narrative is saying to men, "Come on, be emotional with your partners, talk to them about your feelings." I think I think that's a very much feminine therapy advice to a man that actually can actually have be more harmful in the polarity dynamics. What's your perspective on the advice to men about being emotional with their partners?
You know, it's a question that I get asked all the time. I think it's a yes and a no. I think
Yeah.
men do need to be more emotional. It depends what that looks like. I mean, you can't you have to your primary purpose with your woman is to be present.
Yeah.
And if you're not in touch with your emotions, you're not going to be present.
Yes.
So that doesn't mean indulging in your emotions. That doesn't mean going to her
Yes.
to complain, you know, about things or to get a kind of turn her into your mother. But to acknowledge that you're in pain, to acknowledge
Mm,
that you've been hurt, to acknowledge that you're scared
mm,
right now, to acknowledge that you're angry, to be present with her and what it is you're feeling, I think is very important. I do agree that in psychotherapy is, you know, is dominated by women and therefore dominated by the feminine perspective.
mm.
Um, Inevitably, I mean, you know, it has to be that way, and there's nothing inherently wrong with that. But of course, that's not going to work for a lot of men. I mean, I had that problem, you know, going through all of my training, I felt there was a feminine bias, and I felt aspects of my masculinity weren't seen or weren't being served. The feminine imperative is to affirm and understand, to love and have compassion. And that's important. We need that. We need the mother energy and the father energy. But the father needs to challenge and needs to call the man forward. And so you need both. And so when I work with men, there's a place where I'm understanding and acknowledging and affirming of their
Mhm,
emotional
mhm.
experience. And they need to be challenged and they want that challenge. They need that challenge. And women, so women are different in that way, and we need different things. So, um, it's to yes, opening up to your woman isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's a good thing. It's just how you do it.
Yeah.
It's the energy of it. If you're looking for her approval, or you're showing emotions, is it's not weak,
Hmm, hmm.
right? People have this belief. It's like I have to hide my emotions from my woman. She doesn't care. No, your woman wants to feel you predominantly.
Mm.
And so the issue is really containment. Can I
Yeah.
be with my emotions and contain them for myself and allow my woman to be with me there? Because sometimes we need a hug. Sometimes we need
Yeah.
to be held in some
Yep.
way. And I think that women are appreciative of feeling that part of our humanity.
Yep.
If we're indulged in it all the time, maybe they're going to be turned off. But if every once in a while you come home and you say you had a bad day and you need a little loving, I think women, I think they like that.
Yeah, I agree with you. Yeah, I think no emotion creates uncertainty. Like, what's going on? Like, I can't feel him. What's going on in his world? There's no connection, and going and being emotionally dependent is one of insecurity. It's like,
Right,
yeah, and I think there's a fine balance, and I think it comes down to emotional availability. Like the
right.
word you use, presence. Can I feel him? Is he present? I have a word here at Always Better Than Yesterday. It's called Heartprint, and it really symbolizes the legacy, the ripple effect of the interactions that we have with people. I really believe that every contact leaves a trace, and people listening to this will just create a one degree of new possibilities. That a new thought might just create a new possibility. Maybe they'll think, act, or do something differently than they wouldn't already have done. I'd love for you just to take a moment just to reflect, all of the good work that you've put out in the world, your entire career, all of the interactions that you've had, all of the kings that you're making. I wonder what you hope your heartprint will be.
That's a great question. I probably can't know or understand it in real time.
Mm,
It's something I'll only be able to reflect back on at the end of my life. But from the perspective I'm sitting in right now, it's I I hope that I'm through my example and through my teaching that I just give men permission to be more of who they really are,
mm,
and to give them also permission to um, feel themselves more, full range of human experience, to trust and know their impulses, to work to get closer to service and to God. Um, that's what I'm trying to do in my
mm,
life every day, and it's always a struggle, like every day, to wake up and and orient myself to my higher self, and to be living my mission. And so I don't get it right every day, and that's okay. I try to liberate myself from the shame of that, and just keep moving on. And I think forgiveness is really an important virtue that we have. But just do your best, show up in a good way. Brotherhood is important. Um, and Yeah, we'll see. We'll see. We'll see.
yeah, yeah,
I'm just winging it. I'm just kind of making it up as I go. I have a,
same.
I'm sure there's some overriding narrative here, but I don't think it's going to all make sense to me
Well,
until
the key
the
to
end.
winging it is to keep moving and just hope they don't figure it out. That's been
Exactly.
my strategy. I wonder if I phrase the question slightly differently, whether anything new comes out, which is imagine your descendants, the descendants, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 generations
Right.
time. What are they thanking you for?
Um, I think courage is the highest virtue.
Mhm.
Maybe love, but let's go with courage. That I showed courage, that I followed my passion, that I didn't let myself get swayed by all the things going on in the culture, or other people's demands on me. That I followed my path, my heart, even when I didn't understand fully where or why it was leading me where it was leading me. That I just surrendered to something greater than myself, and all of that added up to a life that was interesting and filled with adventure and experiences and challenges. And I want to live. I want to have as many experiences as I can. I want to feel as much as I can. I want to know myself as deeply as I can. And I think that hopefully that example, yeah, will get passed on to future generations, and they'll take it even further than I have.
Oh, love that, brother. I will share all your good links in the show notes, your website, the School for Kings, Sacred Hunting. Is there anything more about your work that you'd love to just let people know about?
No, that's it. I'm really, I have a lot of different things going on, but and I just launched School for Kings. We're in the middle of our
Mhm.
first program called Emotional Mastery, but um, I'm going to make a full launch of that probably in the next, I don't know, 3 or 4 months, and really want to, yeah, I'm not exactly sure what I want it to look like yet, but
Yep.
to be full and comprehensive. It feels like where my energy wants to go. I
Mm.
love the name School for
Yeah,
Kings,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
and it came to me in a flash, and it was available. It was
Nice.
unbelievable that it was available to me
Yeah, 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 yeah.
when I went to search for the website, and it was available on Instagram. I was like, okay, there's
There
some
you go.
kind of resonance there, and it feels like where I'm at in my life. And
Good.
so yeah, I'm going to be really putting a lot of energy and focus into that, building community,
Mm.
online events, but also in-person events of all different natures. So I mean, I think guys can look for that, and I expect to have that. Getting growing over the next 2, 3, 5, 10, 15 years, and hopefully beyond me. That's what I'd like to be my legacy.
Well, here's to your fullest expression, my friend. I am here for it. I appreciate you. I'm grateful for all that you are in the world and this conversation. It's now at the point where I wish I was Joe Rogan and I had 3 hours with you instead of an hour. But yeah, super grateful for you. Would just be honored if you'd leave a final thought from your good self.
Well, I would just encourage all the men out there to what I say to all the people that I work with: don't hold back.
Mm.
Just don't hold back. Just trust yourself. Just go for what you want. Keep risking. There's risks out there for you every day and every moment. There's always a risk. Keep taking risks. Let life unfold. Tolerate being in the unknown. You don't
Mm.
know what's going on in real time. There's something inside you that's greater than you, that is working on you. And if you surrender that, you're going to get everything that you want.
That's an amen. Appreciate it, brother.
Appreciate you. Thank you, Ryan.
Hey, my friends, thank you for making it to the end. I hope that our time spent together today has left you a little bit better than before you push play. I'd really appreciate if you just took a moment to leave a review to allow me to meet more people where they are and hopefully leave them a little bit better too. If you're curious to know how I, through Always Better Than Yesterday, can serve you, your team, your organisation, then head to alwaysbetterthanyesterday.com to connect. And while you're there, let me know 1 or 2 things that you're going to do as a result of listening to this conversation. I absolutely love hearing your thoughts, your reflections, and the things that this spark in your own heart and mind. If you want more insights from my heart and mind, I do send out short episodes on a Monday, Tuesday, Thursday and Friday, and again, I hope that they serve you well. I appreciate you listening. I'm Ryan Hartley, host of the Always Better Than Yesterday podcast. a podcast for heart-centered leaders just like you. Keep leading, my friends. Always love.